My name's Hannah Hawsey. I'm a developer advocate at a company called Anvil, and I actually used Anvil to build this pregnancy tracking app. So I'd like to start out with a demo because I like to live slightly dangerously. It's been live for a few weeks now, so I'm hoping it will work nicely. So yeah, here we are. This is Fruitmoji. You can navigate to this website right now if you want to give it a try yourself. It's called howpregnantami.com. I was kind of surprised that the domain hadn't been registered already, but there you go. So, okay. You have three means of calculating your due date. So I'll just go with due date, given that I already know mine. You can pop it in to my little calendar pop-up. And then you get a little calculation, which it tells you how many weeks pregnant you are and what fruit or vegetable emoji the baby is sized like right now. And there's also a semi-serious link, which is to the NHS website with the relevant actual medical information that might relate to that week. So you can see there's a login button. So I've actually already created an account for myself. I'll log myself in. Not a big difference, but it means that I don't have to recalculate the due date every time I navigate to the website. So some of my users create accounts, and there's also an email alert option as well. So if I look in my inbox, I can see that this morning I was emailed about which week I am. So get a little pineapple emoji in my inbox and also a little link to the NHS website and an unsubscribe link, which I'm not going to click, but which would remove me from the mailing list. So yeah, so that's the app. Now I'm going to talk a bit more about how it actually works and how I put it together. So I wrote the app using a tool called Anvil, which lets you write Python code to drive web apps. It's available for free. It's a free platform. And it looks a little something like this. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview. I'm going to do like a proper code walkthrough a bit later in the talk. But basically there's a design pane here where you can drag around buttons and add different parts to the app. So you can change the text. I spent far too long deciding what fonts and stuff to use, so you can really have a lot of fun with the design section. I'm not a very design-oriented person, so it's kind of nice that it's just a bunch of components you can drag in. And then the code here is it's just Python. So you can see that I have a class form1, and that's what gets run when someone hits the web app for the first time. And so in the init, we have things like the calculation method. So that's the drop down here. It gets populated with 3 different methods. Each button also has a corresponding function, and if you double click on them within the designer, you can see like what function that is. So this is for signing up users, for instance. And there's a bunch of other stuff that I will mention in a bit, but that's probably enough to be going on with. Oh, and the other important thing is that there's a run button. So if you're designing an app, you can like preview it, which is handy. So yeah, that's Anvil. I really like it compared to other tools that I've used, not just because I work there, because it lets you run Python natively in the browser, so you don't need to worry about working with JavaScript and CSS unless you actively want to. You can make all of the design decisions in Python for how stuff works, which is really nice. It also lets you keep a Git repo of your work. So here's mine. And you can clone this locally, and it's just all of the Python code that you've written, along with some YAML files, which are to do with how the actual appearance in the browser is dictated. So if I go into client code, you can see that I've got all of my Python files laid out. So for instance, fruitcalc.py is the Python module that I wrote to calculate due dates and then work out what corresponding fruits should be displayed. So yeah, that's really nice. And you can push from it as well if you want to develop locally. Obviously, you can develop it in the browser like I just showed you, but it's sometimes nice to develop locally too. So yeah. So why emoji anyway? Well, first of all, emoji are fun. Emoji started out as a means to add kind of emotion and communication nuances to Japanese text messages, and they became so popular that they were adopted by the Unicode Consortium as a set of Unicode code points back in 2007, I think. And since then, their popularity has only increased. I think one of the funnest facts that I found when I was researching for this talk was that the Oxford Dictionary's word of the year in 2015 was the laughing, crying face, which is just great. So they explained that there were other strong contenders from a range of fields, but the face with tears of joy emoji was chosen as the word that best reflected the ethos, mood, and preoccupations of 2015. I wonder what the emoji for 2020 will be. And I also noticed that on all of these, there's a lot of different pregnancy tracker websites that like to compare your the size of your fetus to various fruits and vegetables. So I figured, why not combine the two, since there are now so many fruit and veg options with emoji, and compare it to emoji fruit and veg. On a slightly more serious note, emoji can actually be used for like health communication in other arenas. So this is the mosquito emoji, which was introduced in 2018. The idea behind it is that it's a good way to communicate across languages about the dangers of things like Zika virus and malaria. So the Johns Hopkins Center for Communications encouraged the adoption of this mosquito emoji. And so now it's an official part of the emoji set of code points, which is pretty cool. And it's already being used for health communication. So yeah. Oh, and I couldn't not mention the Emoji Movie, which is, as Roger Ebert said, a work so completely devoid of wit, style, intelligence, or basic entertainment value that it makes that movie based on Angry Birds seem like pure artistic statement by comparison. So if you go to the Unicode Consortium website, you can see previews of what different emoji look like on different browsers, which was really handy when I was developing the app. So as you can see, there's a lot of different fruit and veg options available, and it seemed to be increasingly possible that I should be able to find one for every single different week of pregnancy. I had to stretch a little for some of them, but I think it works. And the awesome thing about using Anvil meant that I just needed to worry about Python, and Python 3 supports Unicode natively. So long as I could display them within my Python code, I knew that it would show up on the browser okay. Something that I did as kind of a shorthand to help me out was I used this library called Emoji, which is a really cute little module, which I recommend. It's pretty fun. So this is like a tiny piece of code that I wrote basically to preview the different emoji that I was working with. Let me just activate the environment. So main.py is just the code that you can see under there. So the nice thing is that there's these emoji aliases, which is the English description for each emoji. So what I have stored in the table of the app, so that it's driven by like a little database table, is the aliases. And then I look up, I've got a little Python dict, basically a copy of this, which looks up which alias corresponds to which emoji and therefore what to display. I did it like that, even though you can store Unicode natively within Anvil's data tables, because sometimes I was doing development on my phone, which doesn't display emoji very well. So it was nice to be able to actually noodle around and see stuff in their table still. So yeah, so I added a couple of extra features to that I thought would make it kind of more interesting. The first one was a login for users. So it stores your due date information, so you don't need to put it in and recalculate it every time you go back to the website. Anvil makes this pretty straightforward. There's literally a button that you click to add a user's service. And I have a login button at the top that I connected up to check whether someone already has a user account. And if they don't, then it creates one for them. And that's another table that I will also show you when I do the code walkthrough. So you can do all kinds of authentication. I just stuck with a plain password and email address, and also an option to log in via someone's Google account. You could also add a Facebook login or Microsoft 365 if you wanted to, but I didn't bother with that. So obviously, an important thing that I had to take into account was GDPR and just generally protecting users' data. So this, however lighthearted it seems, is confidential medical information about someone's pregnancy. So I need to take care to make sure that they can delete stuff that's about them really easily, and we don't keep a copy of it for longer than necessary. So as well as adding an unsubscribe option to the emails, which is just you click the unsubscribe link and you can delete your account that way. There's also just a delete button at the bottom of the main page of the app, so you can delete your account that way as well. Another thing that I do is whenever I send out the email, so I have a daily task that checks whether people's gestation week has changed and sends them an email if it has. If the number of weeks that they've been pregnant is over 43, then I just drop them from the data table as well. Just assume that they probably don't want to have alerts from the app anymore. Okay, so enough talk about the kind of generalities. Let's actually jump into the code. So yeah, I'll just take you through a couple of the things that I was talking about. So this is the login that I was mentioning. So when we click login, we check whether someone's already logged in. If they aren't, then we present them with a form that lets them sign up. Otherwise, we log them out and we do update the login status, which is this other longer function. This is mainly about displaying the right things depending on whether people are logged into the app or not. So the text that the button displays is log out if you're already logged in. And it also displays a little text here to say what the user's due date is, kind of a handy reference. So when someone does sign up, their information gets put into this table. This is a copy of the app, so I'm not showing anyone else's data except for my own. But this says that I signed up on the 26th of October. I last signed in today. And it gives my due date as well, which is something that I store about users whenever they recalculate their due date. And it also has an unsubscribe token, which is unique to me, which means that if I click unsubscribe within my email, I'm going to do that now, then say OK. And then it should remove me from the table of the app, although I think that'll remove me from the table of the actual app rather than the demo app. So you might not get to see that. I'll just refresh and see if it... no, OK. But yeah, it would remove me from this table. You're going to have to trust me on that this row would untick signed up for emails. And then you also have the option to just delete the account. So yeah, actually I can demonstrate the account deletion pretty easily. So this is just running the clone. So I'll click delete account. Yes, I definitely want to delete it. Now if I stop, you can see that my row has completely disappeared. Yeah, so okay, if we go back to the form, we can see that it's importing a couple of things up at the top. These are some other classes that dictate the different pieces of the app. So we've got a couple of different pickers for the different ways that we can determine due date. So this, for instance, is saying, select the date of your last period and the typical length of your cycle. And then we do a little calculation in here to work out what due date you have based on that. The due date picker is the easiest because we just use the date that you gave us. And then there's a conception date one as well, which has a similar calculation. It's got a different time delta of days. I guess one of the things here to note is that I make sure that people can't pick due dates that are kind of obviously wrong. Like you can't pick a due date that's far into the past because you now have a baby, hopefully. And likewise, you can't pick one that's way into the future, more than like 9.5 months away. So you can just limit that by having the min date and max date here. This is the section I was mentioning before where we have a lookup for the emojis. So in a different table, I have the correspondence between the number of weeks pregnant and what kind of emoji we want to display, written in words rather than actually as the emoji itself. And then we just go to the table in Fruit Calc and look it up, and that's what we return. It also gives us the right NHS link for the different weeks of gestation. So between 1, 2, and 3 weeks pregnant, that's all one page on the website. And likewise, anything after 42 weeks is the same page, because usually people don't go overdue more than that. The email stuff is, I think, one of the funnest parts. So this is all in a separate module, which is a server code. So some stuff only runs on Anvil's server compared to these forms which run in the browser. That's to keep things safe and make sure that we don't accidentally spam people or have malicious attackers be able to do that. So we can do things like send welcome emails to people. We also have a regular task every day. It's a background task, so it runs daily on the server, to email users on their weekly anniversary. So it has a look in the table of users. It finds out whether they've signed up for emails and checks that they have a due date, because if they don't have one yet, then we can't really know anything much about when we should email them. And then it checks that if their number of days mod 7 is equal to 0, so the week has just ticked over for them, and they're less than 43 weeks of gestation, then we'll send them an email with the next fruit emoji. Oh, and we just drop them entirely from the table if the weeks are greater than 43, like I mentioned. So I can demonstrate a couple of, let me just demonstrate one of the other pickers. So yeah, and then you can create an account and it'll appear in the users table, which is just here. Oh, sorry, these are services that I've added. So you can see that I've chosen to add the email and password service and also sign in with Google here. I could choose Facebook and Microsoft and a bunch of other things as well, but I've chosen not to do that. So that's basically it. Each button in the app corresponds to a method in my class for the form. Yeah, the back end is driven by this data table here. So if I go back in here, so you can also customize the domain of your apps. So I chose howpregnantami.com, which, yeah, surprisingly was not taken. So I should add the caveat that registering custom domains on an Anvil app does require some paid membership. I have an individual membership, but all of the apps are also hosted for free on the name of the app.anvil.app. So it's also hosted on fruitmoji.anvil.app. And that part you don't have to pay for. So you can just do that on the free platform. You can also change the favicon and the title of the page. which is kind of fun. So that's why we've got fruit emoji and the fruit there, because in titles and logos, I uploaded a little strawberry emoji. So yeah, a couple of things that I learned along the way. Making it pretty. So image choice is really important if you want to make apps look good on a range of screens. The default settings for Anvil apps seem to work quite well with this, but I recommend getting a nice high resolution image that's portrait scale so that it shows up nicely on mobile as well. So you can kind of, hopefully you can see it all up there with my screen. You can see that you can see more of the image if you're scrolling it on a mobile screen. So it's nice to have something that appears in an interesting way if you're doing it on a mobile as well. I use Pexels.com for my free stock images, and I really recommend them. They have a lot of Creative Commons licensed images for free. Another thing that I discovered during my research was that due dates in general are wildly imprecise. It's incredibly frustrating. So the nominal length of gestation doesn't necessarily correspond to the actual length of gestation by an error margin of like several weeks. So I had to make sure to allow for a margin of error and not make my users feel bad if they went overdue or if they ended up giving birth early. So I will admit that I did resort to using the baby emoji for people who are post, I think 41 weeks and over, because I ran out of large fruits and vegetables. But yeah, I keep people on the app until at least 43 weeks. So if they're running overdue, they don't have to feel like the app is kind of poking them into anything. They can still continue to use it. This is especially true of first babies. The graph that I got here is from Alan Downey, has a great IPython notebook about this issue, which is plotting data from, I think, the National Institute of Science in the US. So I recommend checking that out. Another thing that I realized is that UI should be reflective of state, not prescriptively stateful. So I ran into a bit of an issue when I had a couple of people testing out my app, and one of them, she created an account before she did the pregnancy calculation for the first time, which I hadn't expected. I thought that, you know, first someone's gonna do the calculation and get a little emoji result, and then they'll be like, that's cool, I'd like to create an account to preserve this. But actually she logged in and created an account first. So I had to make sure to handle that kind of thing throughout the app. So I've tried to just make it so that it reflects whatever state users are currently in. I think in general, this is a good idea for web app development because you never know quite how someone might have gotten to a particular page. So it's nice to just reflect what knowledge you currently have about them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I have blogged about this. If you want to read my more extensive write-up with bigger code samples, there's also a link at the end of that blog post. So if you want to just have a whole copy of my code, you can. I also actually genuinely recommend the Unicode Consortium's write-ups about the various emoji that they have adopted over time. They're fascinating, especially the ones about modern emoji, like the mosquito. I think it's a really cool insight into like the state of communication and the modern web, and it's just, I don't know, they're just generally a good read. So yeah, I am gonna now open up to questions and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Hannah. That was a really awesome presentation. I especially loved the part about emojis, so thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions, you can either speak up and ask them, or if you cannot speak or don't want to speak, please drop them in the chat and I'll read them out loud.
And I know I kind of skimmed through the app code quite quickly, so if people want me to go over any part of it in more detail, then I'm more than happy to.
Okay.
I have a question. Thank you for the talk. It was really good. I especially enjoyed the backgrounds of emojis and the humor you put in there. It was really a really good talk. I was interested, when you started designing the app, did you start with an idea of all the functionality it would have, or did you kind of build it up organically?
No, I definitely built it up over time. So the initial design that I had was just like the first part, like the calculator, and then display the emoji for that stage. Adding a login turned out to be quite easy, so I added that next. And then I decided it would be cool if the app could email people. So yeah, I guess I built it up in stages like that.
Any other questions? Oh, there's another question from Victoria. How long did it take to develop the app in total?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I don't think I actually kept track of the amount of time I spent working on it. Not a huge amount of time. I spent a lot of time fussing over which emoji should correspond to which week of gestation. I don't know if that counts or not. No more than like a week worth of spare time, I would say. I think certainly to develop the initial part, it didn't take very long. Just because I kind of had quite a clear picture in my mind of what I wanted to show to users. Yeah, I would say about a week worth of time, just like kind of maybe an hour or so a day, not like a huge amount of time each day.
Okay, that's quite impressive. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not showing you how like it starts out, but there's templates for the apps, so I didn't start with absolutely nothing. In fact, let me just share my screen again. So you can have, they have these templates that let you start out with something that looks quite nice already. So I blatantly just stole the font that they already use, for instance. So I had something that already looked quite cool without too much effort to begin with.
I don't think you stole it. You just
I repurposed
you were
it.
inspired. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And I'll be definitely telling people about this and playing around with it myself.
Yay.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, then, thank you all for joining. I hope you have a good holiday season. Oh, there's another question. Can you say a little bit more about users' data protection process?
Oh, sure. So let me just get the app started again. So data is stored in these data tables that I mentioned. Let me see if I can share my screen again. That. So obviously we don't want to, maybe could you elaborate a little more on the question? So you mean like how we protect data about the users from getting into the rest of the app? Like if someone else is using it, or let me stop sharing so I can, are there any legal obligations you need to follow? Yeah, so I've been trying to follow the principles of GDPR, which is the EU's Data Protection Act. It's about personal data in general rather than medical data. I'm not aware of a specific medical data thing I should be following. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But the idea is that people should know what data an app is storing about them and be able to get rid of their account from a website at any time. So I try to follow that by making sure that every email that I send to users has an unsubscribe link so they can stop receiving the emails. And the unsubscribe link also takes you to the website so that you can make sure you can delete your account as well. Obviously, this is super important with such like a sensitive subject of an app. So I wanted to make it as few clicks as possible for someone to be able to just get rid of their subscription. Is there a standard template that can be used? Not that I'm aware of. I had to write my own unsubscription mechanic for the actual emails because the email service from the app doesn't come with that by default. That's one of the things I go into more detail in on my blog post. I think it would be really handy to have that as like a standard thing, but I had to write my own. You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? Nope. Okay. I will be dropping the link to the recording in meetup.com once it's been released to me from the cloud. So that should be tonight at some point. Thank you again so much, Hannah. To all of you, have a good holiday season. Stay safe. And yeah, I hope to see you all again in the next year. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.